an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 2, Episode 16, or is it 17? I think it might be 17. The Rapes of Graff. In this episode, somebody comes back to us that we haven't seen for quite a while, and he allegedly has turned over a new leaf. However, he is accused of rape by a girl on campus, and Veronica can't help but think maybe he's guilty, understandably. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, guys, this episode was kind of heavy. Thank you very much to Rachel for commissioning this. I am really surprised at the fact that this is one of the few, sort of case of the weeks that Veronica doesn't actually wind up solving by the end of the episode. I sort of appreciate that it isn't. But at the same time, I really wanted the satisfaction that you never get in real life of the guy who's guilty of this being nailed to the wall. At the same time, I feel like the fact that she doesn't immediately figure out who it is and that it doesn't get wrapped up in a tidy little bow super easily like some of the other stuff, that feels almost like the show is taking this more seriously. And I'm extremely curious about what's going to happen and who it's going to turn out to be. So Michael Cera's in this episode. So is the actress that plays the cousin that he's in love with on Arrested Development, which was super weird. I feel like Michael Cera is going to wind up being the rapist. And I don't really have any evidence to support this, except for the fact that I feel like what they are trying to do, or might be trying to do, which is something that I also would do were I a writer and had this sort of platform, I would want to point out that you gotta be afraid of everybody. As a female of the species, you got to watch your back amongst every dude, pretty much. And whether or not he seems academic and retiring and conscientious and polite, that has no bearing on whether or not he is a horrible person. And we'll see if I'm right about that. But there is a sort of tendency on a lot of mystery shows for there to be a sort of background person that seems pretty innocuous and they wind up being the one. I mean, that's just a kind of a trope, There will be a dude who seems obviously terrible. I always talk about Poirot and things like this. And it turns out that it's his secretary that's guilty and not him. Just because it helps to throw you off. However, like I said, I have no evidence to support this. The only thing that I am working with is tropes when it comes to guessing. And I would kind of like it if it turned out that he was the one because of that message, because it's damn true. And it's really easy to be accuse somebody who seems super aggressive and hyper masculine, hyper toxic masculine. It's really easy to be oh yeah, I'm sure he's scum. But Michael Cera's Brock Turner. Michael Cera is the goofy, kid who does not do football. He's a swimmer. He's somebody who gets good grades. He is a person that people would have a hard time believing would do something like this. And that's the thing, is that dudes know what we think of when we hear the word rapist. And if they don't fit that profile, they feel very secure. because they know people are just going to kind of either not believe it or not want to believe it, which equates to the same thing. And we'll see. So this episode starts off with everybody in Veronica's class getting assigned an essay to write about the meaning of freedom. And they, like, the prize is that they get an internship in some office. And I'm not even sure. We are no longer writing about the use of mythic archetype. You are all instead entering our Mayor Woody Goodman's county-wide essay contest on the subject of freedom. And when she writes that, everybody turns and looks at Logan and high-fives him, except for Veronica. And the teacher tells them that, if you get this internship, you're going to have something really good on your resume for colleges. And also, they're going to be demolishing the old Shark Stadium, and you get to push the plunger for it. Which, is sort of a silly prize, but also I kind of do want to push a plunger on a huge demolition project, so I'm not even going to try and front and act like I don't care about this. And this leads to Veronica coming up to Logan and asking him about getting his case dismissed and how he feels about it. So apparently this all worked out, his little plan and his, leveraging the dating of what's-her-face. But it turns out that he actually likes her. Now, guys, help me out. Last episode, did it not end with him coming up to Veronica and telling her, I think I did something terrible? Am I wrong? This episode starts without really any reference to that sort of emergency moment, or it seemed urgent to me at the time. I feel like I missed something. Did I miss something? Or is it just sort of meant to be implied that they already talked about his relationship? I don't know. It's just, she says, and did Hannah understand why you wouldn't be seeing her anymore? It's a weird way to end the last episode and then not have the first episode sort of open with that. Because they really made it seem like it was, and this is what I was saying when I ended the last episode. I was like, I'm getting the vibe that he maybe is supposed to have done something really terrible. But then I'm like, is he just talking about his girlfriend? And I can't decide whether or not, I think I didn't miss anything. I don't know. But it's just sort of weird. I just don't really understand why he would go to Veronica about that, really, because the thing is supposed to be that he feels like he fucked up in a relationship, and I just don't see him going to Veronica for advice about this. He knows perfectly well what he has to do is dump her. What does he think Veronica is going to say? You go to Veronica for stuff that you need investigated, or where you think somebody's lying to you. He goes to her when he's worried about going to prison, not about a girl. It's just a weird way to end the last episode. I don't really know what they were going for there. But anyway, it becomes clear that he did not tell Hannah about the, real reason why he started seeing her. And she's disgusted at the fact that they had this big talk and that he came to see her with this plaintive plea for help and then wound up totally not taking her advice, evidently. And then there's the whole, the interest that Wallace is showing in Hearst, which is the campus, the college that's in town. And Veronica apparently promised to go with him to the tour. And she is really not interested. She's going because he wants support. He wants somebody with him. Totally understandable. I don't know if you guys have done these sorts of campus tours. I've only done a few. When I was applying to colleges, I was in a boarding school, And we did something which was called Unified Auditions in Chicago, because we went to a really specialized school with people who wanted specifically to go, a lot of them wanted specifically to go into theater. There was a huge gathering of different college representatives in Chicago, and they did a stream of auditions all day, every day for like 3 straight days. And basically the school like flew us out there, and we went and interviewed. I think we had a minimum requirement of applying to at least 10 schools, and I applied to 15. So I did all of my interviews and all of that stuff like from a hotel, and I never actually saw the campuses that I was going to or that I was applying for. I think back now, and there was a school that really wanted me, and I wasn't interested because they didn't have they weren't a big name. And now I look back and wonder what would have happened, because I wouldn't have had the debt that I do. They were willing to pay a lot more. And I always say that I went with a school that was willing to give me the biggest scholarship, but I conveniently forget that the one that was willing to give me the biggest scholarship was a school that I just didn't really care about or know much about, and that I just sort of didn't even consider. And yeah, well, little things like that you think back and you're like, oh shit, I remember that wrong. But yeah, the campus is in Neptune. So as far as Veronica is concerned, there is no reason to go to this school. The whole point of getting out of high school is to get out of town. And I sympathize deeply with this. For God's sake, I went abroad for my senior year. I could not wait to get out of the town that I was in. And I didn't care about anybody that I went to school with. I had friends, but I wasn't really that close with anybody that I felt like being apart was going to be particularly terrible. And I made new friends pretty easily. So I was just like, whatever, I'll just, find new friends. It's fine. Which really is an attitude that has carried on for most of my life. But Wallace wants to... He would probably get an athletic scholarship, which he knows, and that would be super helpful. And also, Veronica's father is low-key in favor of her going to this school because probably it's less expensive. Also, it's in town and he wants to be able to see her. And there's just a convenience factor. When you go to school nearby, it's just so much easier to move in and out and get your kid back for the summer and stuff. Going to school, even where I did at Carnegie Mellon, it was only in Pittsburgh, which isn't that far from Connecticut, but it was far enough. And getting all of my shit back from the dorm room was a hassle. So I really understand her father just being like, oh, this would be so much easier though. So we jump over to Logan, and Hannah is trying to sort of flirt and play, and he is being really weird about it and realizes that he needs to break up with her. And he does it really abruptly, bad breakup scene, Logan, buddy. I understand that you kind of sometimes this happens where you need to do something, you're building up to it and dreading it, and kind of you're intending to find the perfect moment. And then for whatever reason, you just wind up blurting it out in a moment that is not at all the perfect moment because you suddenly find that you can't contain yourself anymore. And I think that's kind of what happened here with him, but it is really hard to watch. He just kind of gets pushed over the edge by her being so cutesy when he's obviously trying to be distant and pull away from her. And she has this horrible moment of just being like, if this is a joke, it's not funny. And that's brutal. I hated that. Poor thing. I like Hannah. It's surprising to me that I like her as much as I do, because I feel like if this were a different script, she'd come across as really irritating. But I actually feel not just sympathy for her, but she's cute without seeming vapid. Does that make sense? And she just... And I don't really have a lot to base that on. It's just the way that she's playing the character, I think. But then we go to Hearst's, and they're doing the tour. And this is where Michael Cera turns up. My name is Dean. This is going to be a 3-day tour. It's important that we all get to know each other, and we're going to play a get to know you game. And everybody pairs up but they're not supposed to pair with somebody that they know. And immediately Wallace spots a very cute girl and is like, hey, what's up? And goes to talk to her. And Veronica is left alone. And so she winds up paired with Michael Cera. And then somebody belatedly joins the group. And it turns out to be Troy, I believe is his name. The guy that turned out was like a drug dealer and a liar and like completely using her and was a huge creep, and that she stole drugs from. And honestly, I am dying for a conversation between the two of them where we find out what actually happened after their last phone conversation where he realized that the drugs were gone. Because, guys, what the fuck did he do? Like, he was in trouble already, right? Like, I can't imagine what happened here. I don't know, because him and his girlfriend, they were planning to like run off together, right? And I just want to know. I just want the whole sordid tale, because he keeps trying to tell her that he's better and working on himself and changed as a person. And I'm not somebody who tries to be like, people can't change. I don't believe that. I really think people can change a lot. Like, just watching my parents, watching myself, people can change a lot. However, there is no obligation on people who have been hurt by said person to believe them when they say that they have changed. They are under no obligation to buy that story. They are under no obligation to give this person a second chance. Like, if you changed, be different, be better in general, and don't do it like you're trying to prove something to a person. And maybe that will be enough to make it clear that this isn't just a show. But it's hard when you're somebody that a person is trying to convince they have turned a corner. It's hard not to see everything they do as a performance, as a big show to convince you. And it's not your fault if you feel that way, because that's what they did to themselves. That's the consequence of lying or just disappointing. And this guy, I mean, he was like a lot more egregious. This isn't just some dude that like cheated on her and broke her heart. This is a guy who came into a situation with a whole ass agenda, a active liar who tried to like frame other people and was generally just really trash. It's a whole other level. And I understand her reticence here because he winds up getting accused of date rape. And he insists that he didn't do it. And you can see that, like, she feels like he probably wouldn't come to her if he had done it. So there's that feeling of just, like, the logic of it doesn't make a lot of sense that he did do it. But at the same time, why do you want to help this guy, right? Like, what possible motivation is there except for the fact that if she doesn't help him, that means that the actual rapist is out here continuing to do what they do. And that's a pretty horrific consequence. So she's kind of put in a shitty situation where she's like made responsible for finding out who actually did this. And she did not sign up for that. And it sucks, especially considering what she went through. So let's see. I'm paused at the spot where she spots him and it's just like, motherfucker. And I have to say, Kristen Bell's acting right here, because when she sees him, she gets a kind of a look on her face that's like, you gotta be kidding me at first. But then when you cut to after the credits, because it jumps from her meeting him and realizing he's here to the credits. And then we come back and he says, my name's Troy. And he's introducing himself, trying to be cute. And she has an expression on her face that's familiar. That stone-faced, like, I know you're trying to be adorable and win me over with your charm. And that is exactly the shit that you did when you were garbage. I don't know why you think this is going to work or be adorable right now. And I love this expression on her face. Like, she is just so fucking not here for this guy. He says something about going to therapy and stopping with drugs and dumping his ex-girlfriend and everything. And he says that he's changed into more or less a good boy. And she says essentially that she is not interested and walks away after a brief back and forth. And it's really uncomfortable, and I don't know what I would do. I feel like I would have to put him on blast in front of everybody, but also that's creating a scene that I'm not sure I want. So, and he says, I'm not lying to you, Veronica. I just want you to know that. And she's just like, yeah, I don't really care. This is over for me. And she walks away, and it's really clear that it's not water under the bridge. She still does care. But she cares in that way that you care when somebody isn't part of your life anymore. What they do doesn't really affect you. But you are sort of wanting closure, And you can't help that. I mean, we all sort of want that, don't we? It's part of why rape cases are also very frustrating, is because there's often no closure. And there isn't in this episode. So that sucks. So Logan gets a cake in his locker that's got a get out of jail free card printed on the top. And it's in a pink box, and later Dick cuts into the cake and there's a file inside, the joke of smuggling a nail file in to get out of jail. And I don't know who this is from. Is this supposed to be from Hannah, that he did this before he broke up with her? Because that's pretty rough. Oh, Anya says from Hannah. Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty adorable. I like that. Go, Hannah. Makes me want cake so bad. But yeah, this whole little, I mean, Hannah, spoiler alert, winds up forgiving Logan. And I, just got through being you don't have to forgive somebody. You're not under an obligation to give them a second chance. I am sort of surprised at how easy it was for him to just be yeah, look. But I also do feel and I said this last episode, he was literally trying to fight for his life, to not be thrown in prison for God knows how long. And I can't really be that mad at Logan for doing something underhanded like this when the stakes are that high. If I was facing prison for a murder that I didn't commit, whether called manslaughter or murder, it doesn't matter. I think I would do just about anything. And hurting somebody with a fake romance is the least of that. So I really can't get too mad at him. And I hope that that's what made her sort of decide to let it go, was that she understands just how much was at stake. And the fact that her dad was straight up lying, she knows after what happened with finding the drugs in his house before, she is aware that he was just inventing this because he was beholden to somebody. So there's no doubt in her mind that Logan is innocent, is the other key. It's not just the fact that he's trying to stay out of jail and she's I love you. You might have done this, but I also just don't want you to go to jail. She knows that somebody is falsely trying to imprison and frame him. So yeah, I feel this is justified. And it just I'm fine with the whole thing. Yeah. Hugabug says, I love Hannah and I've always thought that she's actually good for him. Yeah. She's I don't know. We'll see. But she's got a peppiness that I really think he needs in his life, because things have not been awesome for him, Lord knows. So Veronica is at a college party, and she's talking to some dude who is telling her about the points system that this frat has come up with for, depending on how cute she is, what color her hair is, what race she is, I'm sure would be like an actual factor. All of this is contributing to her being worth like 250 points if he sleeps with her. And you have to get to a certain number of points or else your head is shaved as punishment. And after he propositions her like this, he grabs, and she throws his drink in his face. He grabs another cup to try and throw it at her in retribution. And she moves too fast for him and grabs the cup out of his hand and throws that in his face as well. And it's pretty great. I enjoyed this a great deal. I would love to be able to go back in time in the body that I had in high school, so it's not suspicious, but with the brain that I have now, and just take down these shitty dudes one after another, because Lord knows there are so many of them. And yeah, it turns out that Troy kind of comes to her rescue. I have to be honest here, you guys. I 100% thought this was a setup. I thought that Troy had like made a deal with somebody that they were to hassle her, and he was going to step in to try and like prove to her that he was a better guy. And it turns out that's not the case, but like that's a tactic that dudes use sometimes when they're trying to pick up women. Is one of them will be really gross and the other will act like he's like white knighting her in order to gain her trust. This is a definite thing. The thing that's always like been sort of the question for me is, I guess it has to be for one night stands, because you're assuming if you see this girl again, she's going to pick up on the fact that the guy that was an asshole to her right before you is your friend. Like she'll meet him and put two and two together at some point. But, you know, if you're not intending to see her again, I guess that's not a factor. But yeah, it turns out that he is actually just stepping in and just being like, you are going to let her go. And he starts to say, or do I have to? And this guy immediately punches him in the face. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, okay, so this isn't a setup. Like, because there's no way he's going to let himself just get decked and fall back like that and not try and do something to or it could have been, I guess, that he's playing on her sympathies with the fact that he got knocked down, because she does bend down and sort of help him up, and he could have played this, I guess. But yeah, that was really when I was like, oh, okay, I guess this was not a real thing. And this is, he straight up says, I wanted to prove to you that I'd changed. And a girl comes up to him at this point and starts talking to him. And he offers to get her a drink. And she's like, yeah, let's go. And she's got really long, pretty hair. And it turns out that later on in the evening, she is going to wind up passed out, roofied. And because, of course, we saw him offering to get her a drink, the implication is planted in our heads that maybe he is the one who roofied her, you know? It's really tough that, like, we'll talk about this in a second. But the dude who, like, harassed her, she winds up spotting him, like, coming on to some other girl, and she dumps his drink on him again. And it's just wonderful. I just love this continual humiliation of this guy. And we see Troy leaving with the girl that he just got a drink for, and they are making out. And I appreciate that, like, Veronica does not seem at all jealous or whatever. She's just like, well, there he goes. But yeah, the episode's named The Rapes of Graff, you know? So I'm like, is he actually terrible? And this is all like a big ploy so that he can just come to campuses and do this to girls? Like, I really kind of, I anticipated that he was guilty due to the title of the episode. So I was expecting the worst here, you know? And not saying like I was expecting to actually see the rape. I figured that was what this was going to be, was him having like turned to doing even worse shit than he had before. I don't know what purpose that would have served, but whatever. And then we go to Keith, and he has been called up by lawyer guy, whose name I always forget, he apparently was seduced by an escort, and she handcuffed him to the bed and stole his briefcase. And yeah, he doesn't know, like, it's very clear she was sent by somebody, but he wasn't even aware that she was an escort. He thought that she was an OBGYN because there was like a convention there. And he always comes to conventions because his business card, like, you know, they're sometimes dealing with lawsuits and malpractice cases and stuff. So he likes to put his name out there. And yeah, he says an hour later, I invited up to her room. Champagne is ordered. One thing leads to another. And I get the impression that he did sleep with her because I kind of thought that she had like lured him into thinking he was going to sleep with her, and that she was then going to drug him with the champagne and then leave him there and just take the briefcase. But it seems like she actually had sex with him, waited until he just fell asleep, and then locked his hands up. So yeah, she stole his briefcase, and there is some very relevant to, what do you call it? Relevant to Logan's case, I would imagine, stuff in there. I don't know who would be interested in doing this other than maybe Hannah's dad. But I don't really know, like, or the Fitzpatricks, I guess. But Logan's case was like tossed out already. So what is it that they're even trying to find? You know, I don't know. That's all I could think though. So next morning, Veronica has a hangover, evidently. And she gets a call from Troy, and he is at the police station. And this is when she finds out about the allegations. And he says that the girl, like, he's being accused of having, like, because people saw him with her. He says that he didn't even sleep with her because she threw up, and he immediately took all of the, like, bedding and stuff that she'd thrown up on to the all-night laundry. So he wasn't even in the room. And he thinks that somebody went into the room while he was away and raped her, like, or not even while he was away. He says, I tucked her in. Oh yeah. And then I went to wash my only change of clothes at the all night laundry. And that is the truth, I swear. And, Rebecca says, if I decide you're guilty, I will help hold the hammer while they nail you to the wall. And he nods, kind of like, all right, I guess I just have to take it on faith that you will find something to exonerate me here. So he says, I remember getting the stink eye from some guy who was hitting on her earlier. And we wind up finding out exactly what was going on there. This dude, because he had long hair also, he was hitting on her, and she didn't, like, he thinks, of course, that she, like, led him on and then decided abruptly that she wasn't interested and went off with Troy instead. And he is really bitter because he needed to nail her in order to get his points up high enough to not have his head shaved. And he had long hair that he clearly, like, took pride in. So having his head shaved for him versus a lot of other guys is a much bigger penalty. And he winds up sending the hair that was shaved from his head in a box to her door. But of course she opens it and thinks that somebody has just sent her back the hair they shaved from her own head. And honestly, I felt sick to my stomach, like, when I thought it was her hair. When I find out that it's not, I assume that it's yet another rape victim, and I'm even more disgusted. But, like, the initial gut punch of her opening that box and it being filled with hair, I felt nauseous. Like, That was just so vile. Being raped is bad enough, okay? Like, that's still horrific. Having your head shaved is an extra humiliation just for fun to, like, mark the fact that you did this to this person. And that is something that takes it over the line from being a personal violation that you can keep to yourself and makes you a spectacle and sort of makes it feel like other people are able to invade your privacy without even meaning to by just asking what happened to your hair. That's all they have to say. And now you fucking kind of have to tell a story that you don't want to fucking get into with everybody. And this person has taken a physical part of you away with them. I mean, there's just that whole extra angle is so fucked up and so disgusting. Like, I just don't even know who thought this up. If this episode was based on an actual case that was happening somewhere where this was happening to girls. But like, I look at my hair. I have very distinctive hair that I enjoy. I did shave my head once, but obviously that did not stick. If somebody were to shave my head, it would change everything about how I look in the mirror. You don't ever get to look at yourself again without seeing the effect somebody else had on you against your will. Physical, like, evidence that lasts for months. It doesn't fade like bruises. Your hair eventually grows out, but it's years before it's the length that it was again. Literal years. I mean, that is just like, that is, it's too much, guys. And of course, this girl, and I don't remember what name she has in the show, but she 100% believes that he is the one who did it to her. And there's, of course, no reason not to believe that in her, like, from her perspective. It's an open and shut case who did it. And when she talks to Veronica, she asks, are you dropping off pamphlets or something? And Veronica says, a pamphlet's not going to cover it. And then says, it's just going to suck. And then it'll suck less. And she says it in a way that makes it very clear that she knows precisely what this girl is going through. Like, she doesn't have to say it. There's just a tone and a look. I loved her acting when she finally just says, sorry to bother you, where it's kind of the way that you say something when you realize that you're starting to get emotional and you need to get the fuck out. And the girl stops Veronica and asks if they caught the guy from the party. And Veronica says, it was kind of complicated. I don't really know what happened. I think they're trying to get all the facts straight. And she says, the facts are straight. I know who it was. I just want some biblical justice. And she pulls her hat off so that you can see her head being shaved. And, like, again, from her perspective, of course she knows who it was. Like, there's no doubt. And that's kind of what's always so weird to me about episodes in which a guy is being accused of rape when he didn't do it. It's the sort of thing where I understand that they're just trying to make an interesting story, but, like, guys are just accused and nothing happens to them so often that I find it hard to give a fuck that a guy is being falsely accused. Again, the only reason I care is because some other guy is going to be out there continuing to rape other women. That's the only thing. But as far as, like, him getting pinned to the wall for something that he didn't do, yeah, maybe he didn't rape this girl, but he did a lot of other illegal, shady shit and apparently managed to get away with it so that he could just reform into a better person and was afforded that privilege when plenty of people do less than he has and their lives are ruined forever because they're not a good-looking white middle-class dude, upper class. And him being accused falsely is just, it's hard for me to really be like, we really need to, like, make sure that he doesn't get, you know what I'm saying, guys? So anyway, Veronica goes to a wig shop to try and determine if there are any other victims that went in here with shaved heads. And this woman is like talking about how, oh yeah, I think there was one because of chemo. And I really had to be like, there can't be, it's a wig shop. There have to be women with shaved heads coming in all the time, I would think. Like, that just doesn't seem like, but for the sake of the story, Veronica finds out, she tries this whole thing saying that she was the girl's sister, but then it turns out that the girl was Hawaiian. And there is apparently a Pacific Islanders club on campus. And she tries to track down the girl that bought the wig. And there's a girl sitting there with bright pink hair. And she goes up to her to ask her where she got her wig from. And the girl's like, this is my hair. But then gets stopped by another girl who tells her where to check out for wig. Like, you know. So she is able to figure out that there is likely another victim. That this girl was also victimized and just hasn't been telling anybody by getting a wig. And she finds out about the point system resulting in fraternity brothers also getting their heads shaved if they don't have sex with enough girls, which interests her. And she winds up like going into the frat house, into the basement where she is not supposed to be, and seeing this whole like scoreboard with all of these girls' pictures and their like panties like thumbtacked to the wall. And it's really, really gross. Like, this is 100% a thing that happens. I appreciate the show talking about campus rape because it's such a cultural thing that we just take for granted goes on and have not done remotely enough to combat, other than laying all of the onus at the feet of the female students and being like, well, you can't drink and you can't walk around alone and you can't be on campus at night or go to frat houses alone. If you do, whatever happens is your own fault. And this is an ongoing battle. There are so many campuses that like they can choose whether to report certain rapes because they can like they basically want to make their school look good, and having rapes reported makes them not look good. So they fight that. And it is an ongoing, really gross problem. There was like a full-on manifesto from a fraternity. And this was like 8 years ago, I think, because it was before I moved here. And their like sort of point system leaked. And it was a variety of different names that they use for girls of different races. So, and it was all pie. Like, all of the girls were a type of pie. So there was like, you know, vanilla cream pie. If it was a black girl, it was chocolate cream pie. If it was an Asian girl, it was lemon pie, like lemon meringue pie. It was that sort of language. And each of these girls, depending on their race and their weight and all of these other things, were worth a certain amount. So like, it's easy to look at this sort of thing and be like, this is an exaggeration of a thing that probably happens here and there, but isn't a big deal. But this was a very detailed account that accidentally got leaked by somebody who was rightfully disgusted. And I have no doubt that this is a thing that happens at, like, there has to be at least one frat per college campus that does this sort of thing. I have no doubt whatsoever. So yeah, it's tough to watch and like know that this is real. Meanwhile, Keith and Cliff are talking about looking at the security footage to try and figure out who the girl was. And they wind up accidentally stumbling across some footage of Sheriff Lamb with a girl. And it turns out to be, is it Madison Sinclair? Her first name is Madison, right? I don't remember if her last name is Sinclair. Rachel says yes. I can't believe I remembered her last name. That's so funny. It just goes. It goes together. And he is making out with her in the elevator. And like, she's a high school student. She's 18. And as he says, that's legal. And Keith says, sounds like a swell campaign slogan for the next election. And as he says that, Cliff pulls out a poster that says 18. It's legal. Re-elect Don Lamb. Guys, I gotta tell you, this is one of those things that, and I really need to speed up my talking about this, and I will, but guys who are like, well, you know, technically it's legal, whatever. If guys are just waiting out a clock to decide to like pounce on a girl, they are trash. If all that's stopping them from fucking somebody is the fact that the law would frown on it, even though that person is clearly like too young for them and not fully matured yet and hasn't got life experience behind them. If all that they are worried about is whether they will be arrested, they are garbage. So whenever a guy is like, well, technically that's legal, you could just cross them off your list of decent human beings. Just, it's fine. You know, like, and it's one of those that is hidden behind all the time as being like, well, we have a legal understanding of what being gross is. And as long as we're not over that line, it can't be considered gross. Guess what? Yes, it can. It absolutely can. We think you're gross. Like, it's fine. So yeah, Lamb decides suddenly to cooperate and tells them that the woman whose photo they have is an escort who goes by the name Sugar Jones. And, you know, it's really something that they didn't need to, or he didn't need to let it get to the point where they had to pull this card on him. Not that they wouldn't already have had this information. It's not like they knew they were going to have to blackmail him and they sought something out, like they looked for dirt. But he put himself, by refusing to even give them the time of day, he put himself in the position of them having to leverage this over him in this way. And it's really like, guy, you're really just making life hard on yourself. You could have just cooperated and this would have been fine. So we have the moment in the basement. The dude talks about getting his hair shaved off and that it was his hair that was dropped in front of the girl's door. I can't remember the name of the girl who was raped. And Veronica also blows up the spot of the one dude who tries to say that he hooked up with her when he definitely did not. And of course, the girl who was raped, like, when her friend in the hallway sees Veronica at the beginning of the episode, she's like, your friend here is buddies with Troy, the guy who did this. She's working to like get him off. And it sounds like, I mean, if I heard that, I would 100% believe it, that she was just trying, like, nosing around, trying to find a way to like get her friend off the hook. We know that she doesn't like Troy. You know, if he's guilty, then fuck him. But it does not look good. So Veronica comes in and she has the girl from the, Stacy. Thank you. Oh yeah, Rachel, I mentioned that she was from Arrested Development because her and, Michael Cera, like he was in love with her even though she was his cousin in that show. And it was just so weird to see them like in an episode together, but they never actually talk in the episode. I don't think they might later. Because I really do think that he's the rapist, but we'll see. But Veronica tells her she's got the Hawaiian girl with her. And she's like, I don't think Troy did it. To which Stacy's like, oh, why? Because he's such a good guy. He'd never do that. With a very appropriate kind of sarcasm. Like, she's not wrong about the attitude people take. But the other girl is like, no, it happened to me too. And she takes her wig off and she also has no hair. Hers has started growing in more because it happened like a month ago. And Veronica says, I'm not saying you don't deserve justice. I'm saying there is somebody else out there who did it. And it's an awful moment. Stacy looking at the other girl and saying the same thing. And she doesn't say, were you also raped? But that's clearly what she means. And she just doesn't want to say the words. And the other girl just gives her this long look and nods like, yeah, the same thing. Like, you know what we're saying when we say that. And Veronica tells her whose hair it was that was in that box, which leads to Stacy later on in the episode going to the frat house and tossing the box of hair into the ceiling fan so that it goes flying all over the room, which is honestly petty and not really anything, but also I loved it because it is such an obnoxious mess. There's like, shooting off like a glitter bomb would probably be about the equivalent of messiness. There is nothing like feeling like you've got hair all over you too. Ugh, worst feeling. And Veronica hands over the photo of the cork board with all of the photos and panties and everything like thumbtacked to it. And tells this counselor, I think it is it the dean that she's talking to? But this woman doesn't respond to Veronica when Veronica's like, I'm sure that you want to deal with this. But it turns out like the frat dean of students, thanks, Anias. The frat got like in trouble for what they were doing. And that is one of those things that like, I really want to believe, but there has to be so much evidence that something is going on, and it has to be made so public so as to embarrass a school before anything will actually be done, that I low-key wanted Veronica to just go to the press with this photo rather than to anybody on faculty, because I don't trust that they will do anything at all, you know? And that's like something a lot of people are like, well, why didn't you go to the proper authorities instead of just posting things on the internet? And it's like, because you go to people and they cover shit up. They have their own reasons for not wanting things to get out. If you go public, they are forced to cope in a way that the public will approve of, usually. And there's a big L asterisk after that sentence, but you know what I'm saying. But because of this being a TV show in which justice mostly prevails, usually, we are led to believe that this is taken care of. And again, she doesn't actually find out who did this. We just end the episode with Troy saying that they dropped the charges against him. So at the very least, a dude who was accused is getting out of it. And that's something that's like, you know, a sort of happy ending, but I don't really care about him. I want the person who actually did this to be caught. So I'm very curious about next episode and whether or not they continue on with this storyline or what happens here. But yeah, the Pi Sig's got a semester of probation. And no mixers, no parties, no sports. And it was your photo that nailed them. And he's like really happy. This is Michael Cera telling them this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm still eyeballing you, though. You seem like vaguely threatening. I don't know, guy. We follow this up with the scene with Hannah and Logan getting back together. There is a whole thing where Hannah is in his room later, and they are clearly about to have sex. Like, they are getting naked. And there is, like, they keep cutting between them making out and undressing. And somebody walking to the door, very businesslike. And it turns out that her father came here and got security to let him in. I'm not sure this is a thing that you can do. Like, Logan's of age, right? He's 18. Is his daughter underage? Can he say that this is like statutory rape or something? And that's how, because otherwise I didn't think that a hotel was really allowed to just open guest room doors like this, or, you know, like, so I feel like that's gotta be it. But, yeah, Rachel says baby. Yeah, because she's underage. That might be it. And he flips out on Logan, because the deal was, I retract my statement and you stop fucking my daughter, or stop fucking around with my daughter, and you reneged on your deal. Like, you're out here still trying to nail her after I did my part. What the fuck, dude? And Logan tries to be like, I'm going to continue to see her whether you like it or not, and there's nothing that you can do about it. To which he's like, lol, you want to bet? And we find out at the end of the episode that she got transferred to a boarding school in fucking Vermont. Which, that's brutal. I'm assuming that she's a senior, but she might be a junior. And for most people, not me again, but for most people, leaving school at that point is really tough. You're leaving friends that you've made that really like means something to you, and it just changes everything. And it's something like her mother disapproving of Logan was one thing because her mom really believed that Logan was guilty, but her father knows Logan's not guilty and still doesn't want him anywhere near her. And I really wonder what that's about. If it's just Logan's father, if it's just a scandal in general, why he just wants her away from him. But Anya says she's not a senior. She's younger than him. She says her friends are jealous because she's dating a hot senior. Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot they said that. So, yeah, she's probably like a sophomore or a junior. So, yeah, that's like, I really feel bad for Hannah. Like, this is a fucked up situation, especially like they're mid-year at this point, you know? Being transferred when you're in the middle of the 4 years is bad enough. Being transferred mid-year, that's really, really tough. But yeah, so this is really hard to watch. And then we have the meetup with Sugar Jones and Keith and Cliff. And she doesn't know who it was that wanted her to nab the briefcase. She was called up. They offered triple rate for her to grab the briefcase, and then she was to go into this parking garage and hand over the briefcase to somebody. And she has no idea what they wanted it for. She has no idea who they are, who the guy was that picked it up from her, nothing. And it's just kind of a dead end. They have to now track down the guy who, I guess, this is what I would do, track down the guy who grabbed the briefcase from her via some kind of surveillance camera, hopefully, and figure out who he is, and then he can tell them like who he was working for. But I can't imagine who would want this. It just feels so like specific to me. So then at the very, very end, Veronica's talking to Keith about the fact that C4 could be used for different things and who would have access to it, because you don't just order it on Amazon. And he mentions demolition, which gets her thinking about the stadium that somebody is going to have the honor of blowing up. And she decides to go pretend to be writing an article for the school newspaper and goes over and investigates them. And as she's talking to this guy, she spots the C4 and it looks identical to what she saw in the airplane hangar. And at one point, the guy that she's asking questions of yells, "Hey, Danny, I told you to take that crate to section 11. And she looks up and it's Danny Fitzpatrick. And so she's over here like, oh shit, did one of the Fitzpatricks like grab the C4 and plant it? Maybe they were also the ones that crashed the bus? Like, why? Who knows why? I tend to think that's not connected, but maybe it is. I don't know. I really don't. Yeah, Anya says, I love how she plays dumb and dresses super girly to fool men. Totally. Yeah, she's like decked out in all pink mini skirt and boots and just really like, you know, doing a kind of a like ditzy voice in order to just completely erase suspicion. And unfortunately, that sort of thing works, you know, even when you're not meaning to. I've talked about a few different times, like when I was in high school and college and very pretty, I didn't realize it until I got older, but the surprised looks that I would get when I had a brain in my head, it was because people assumed since I was pretty that I wasn't smart. And I didn't even know that's what they were thinking at the time. I just remembered always getting looked at in surprise and being like, why are they so impressed? I'm not even, what is this? And I look back now and I'm like, oh, they just didn't think I was going to have anything to say for myself and were kind of taken aback when I did, which is super gross. Like, we just have this assumption that girls that are pretty are don't really have to be smart, I guess, because all we need to worry about is like landing a man who'll take care of us. So we don't need to worry about developing our intelligence because we can just ride through life being pretty. And it's like, you know, that we know we're worth more than that, right? Like we are interested in educating ourselves and whatnot for the sake of it, because that's just, you know, part of the drive of most human beings. But it is an unfortunate thing that not only being pretty, not to say that, oh, we should pity poor pretty girls at all, but you know what I'm saying. But also being super girly is another thing. Like a lot of people who I have worked with who have seen that I tend to do up my makeup, that I, you know, have my office decorated like this, when I turn out to be a bit of a hard ass about certain things, are kind of surprised because they don't expect that from somebody who is also like very into the aesthetic. And, you know, it's just like this mentality that we have. And unfortunately, it's believed so much that many women who do prefer a more feminine look have to forego that in order to be taken seriously, because we equate masculinity with being powerful and intelligent. And unfortunately, masculinity is usually unattractive. Let's be honest, guys. It is. And so a lot of women have to sort of like pull back on any sort of makeup or doing much maintenance to their hair, wearing clothing that's like at all interesting. And it's a bummer. It's just, our society is just a fucking garbage fire. Ugh. Anyway, so that's the end of that episode. I'm going to check real quick and see when the next one is. Do you guys know if there's another? I'm going to check, of course, but I want to make sure that there isn't a commission coming up that's like voyeur, so that I can just like watch it. Let's see. This was this 17? Doop, doop, doop. No, this was 16. Okay. So 17. Yeah, that one is not a voyeur episode, I don't think. So fingers crossed. I'm right about that, but I will triple check. But yeah, I am. The next one is 8/10. Oh, Agnes, you're in Europe. 10/8. I was like, 8/10 is over. What do you mean? October 8th. And the next one is voyeur. Oh, okay. All right. So I won't watch it. I hate that when I can't just go and watch it right away. All right. Well, guys, I'll be seeing you in that one. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. And I will see you soon with a new episode. So until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.